Welcome to another edition of Hyper Blue Reviews. Today's review was written based on the unpopular gaming opinion hashtag that was floating around on Twitter late 2019. With that being said, let's talk about Back to the Future for the NES. Back to the Future for the NES isn't a bad game. It isn't the greatest, but it certainly doesn't deserve the criticism that it gets. Take away the obvious movie-based plot and you have a somewhat decent vertical scrolling shoot-'em-up. Granted, you don't start with a weapon, but if you avoid enough enemies, you eventually pick up a bowling ball to throw around. There's also a speed boost power-up in the form of a skateboard. So basically this game is Gradius, but instead of a ship, you're playing as a person. Okay, that's stretching it a bit, but you get the gist of it. If you've seen the movie, then you know what this game is about. Marty gets stuck in the past and is waiting for the doc to get his time-traveling DeLorean up and running so he can get back to the future. For the game, you had to help Marty travel to 4 buildings in Hill Valley in order to help get his parents together. The buildings he needs to travel to are the cafe, the school, the dance hall, and the town courthouse. Marty must get his parents together before the photo he has of him and his parents fades away forever. Back to the Future is broken up into 4 levels that contain 4 stages each. 3 stages of each level are the top-down portions of the game I mentioned already. In these stages, the player has to traverse through the streets while collecting clocks and avoiding enemies. These stages are timed and the player must reach the end prior to the timer running out. This gets progressively more difficult as the game goes on. The last stage of each level is a special stage with a unique challenge. In the first of the 4 special stages, you had to fend off bullies by throwing milkshakes. You had to hit 50 bullies in order to progress, otherwise you had to play the 3rd street stage again. In the second special stage, you had to reject Lorraine's love by blocking cartoon hearts. Again, you had to deflect 50 hearts in order to progress, or it's back to the 3rd stage again. I think you can start to see the pattern here. In the 3rd special stage, you rock out with a guitar and collect music notes. And finally, the last special stage allows you to try to get back to the future in the DeLorean itself. In this stage, you have to avoid the lightning bolts in order to build up enough speed to get back to the future. It's kind of the opposite of the movie, but it works. The last level of the game is actually a little bit unfair. If you don't manage to get up to the appropriate speed before the level ends, it's game over. It doesn't matter how many lives you had prior to that level, you'll have to start the entire game over. Overall, Back to the Future is a simple game that has a bit of variety in terms of gameplay, but it does have some unappealing factors as well. For instance, the same song plays over and over during the street stages, and what a song it is. Take a listen to it in all of its glory. The song is said to be Power of Love, but it's sped up and converted to a MIDI version. It's alright at first, but it does get tiring after a while. The first 2 special stages don't have any music at all, so you get a bit of reprieve from the Power of Love track. The 3rd special stage has a MIDI version of Johnny B. Good, which actually sounds pretty nice. And unfortunately, the 4th special stage doesn't have anything special, it just replays the Power of Love track from the street levels. I've heard people complain about the clock collecting mechanic, but I don't find anything wrong with it. It's a way to keep the game interesting so you're not just walking from one stage to another. It's also an interesting mechanic because you're literally finding time in order to stay alive. The photo at the bottom of the screen acts as another timer. The player loses a life if all the characters in the photo completely fade away. You collect clocks in order to prevent the characters from fading. Each clock you collect prevents the characters from fading momentarily. If you collect 100 clocks, the photo will reset back to its fully unfaded state. This is extremely helpful if you find yourself in a bind. The street stages are a bit samey. Aside from a palette swap, there isn't much to differentiate the levels. To add to the sameness, the same enemies appear throughout the entire game. The enemies range from bullies that chase you, hula hooping girls, men carrying glass sheets back and forth, and bees. The bees are the worst enemies because they fly at you from every direction. You really have to look out for these guys or else they'll sneak up on you and knock you over. The enemies are difficult to dodge, but at the same time you can attack them with the bowling ball that you pick up in order to score points. If you get 30,000 points, you get an extra life. If you're knocked over by an enemy or trip on an object, you lose all of your power-ups. Getting hit by enemies won't kill Marty, but it will slow him down. In addition, getting hit by enemies does not pause the timer, so it's very important to either avoid enemies or kill them with a bowling ball. I'd also like to say that the graphics for this game are pretty decent for the Nintendo. I've seen better, but I've also seen much worse. All in all, Back to the Future for the NES has a certain appeal to it. It's not the greatest game, but it isn't the worst either. It's tolerable, even with so many unappealing features. I felt compelled to play through the entire game after I got the controls down. It has an appropriate amount of challenge for a short game. My recommendation is give it a try. You might just like it. Just be prepared to play with the volume lowered. I give Back to the Future for the NES 2.5 clocks out of 5. So with that being said, that's just one of my unpopular gaming opinions. But what are some of yours? Let me know down in the comments, and as always, thanks for watching.